Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm here with a pizza dough recipe for you at last. So here I have some pizza dough that I mixed up yesterday. It's not really a looker, but I'm going to show you the magic that is hiding in this bowl. Okay, so it doesn't look like much, but when I put a spoon into it, look at all of that bubble structure. That is carbon dioxide that the wild microbes in your sourdough starter have given off as they've digested the ingredients in this pizza dough, which are brown rice flour, arrowroot, xanthan gum, salt, and sourdough starter, and water. So it's a pretty simple recipe. So this has been fermenting for a little over 24 hours. It's going to be pretty sour. The longer the ferment, the more time the bacteria have to give off lactic acid, which makes sourdough sour. So if you like it sour, leave it longer. If you don't like it sour, you can ferment it for just about 6 hours and it'll have a nice yeasty flavor. So I'm going to attempt to do some overhead fancy camera work to show you how to make this pizza dough. Since it doesn't have gluten, it's not going to be as stretchy. It's not going to be stretchy at all, really. And one of the mistakes I find that a lot of beginner gluten-free bakers make is that you expect your dough or your in-process recipe to look like it does when it has gluten in it. So if I were to make a pizza dough that looked like glutinous pizza dough and stretched and I could spin it, the final product would be terrible because I would be designing for the in-process, not for the finished product. So it's sort of a mental hurdle you have to get over when you want to make something turn out. If I want a pizza that looks like pizza and tastes like pizza, the dough, I have to let go of the illusion that the dough is going to look and feel like pizza dough because it's not. We're sort of smoke and mirrors. So we're doing all sorts of trickery to come up with a recipe where the final product looks and feels like pizza. So all of the steps along the way are going to be really different than that. And that's okay. Okay. So what you're going to need is a piece of parchment paper. I have this handy round tray that I like to use for pizza because it's the same size as my pizza stone. If you don't have a pizza stone, that's fine. I like to use a sheet pan with parchment paper and it'll make a rectangular pizza or a much smaller round pizza. But I like this because it's big and it's round and I can get normal looking pizza slices out of it. You want a lot of olive oil. So this dough will stick to some brands of parchment paper. This is the Costco brand, Kirkland, and it works really well. The dough never sticks to it. So a really healthy amount of olive oil there. And then we're going to get all of the dough plopped right on top of that oil. You can sort of see how soft it is. But we basically want to cover all the dough in oil so that we can touch it without it sticking all over our hands. So you can see that it's sitting in this pool of oil. Don't be shy here. We're going to put more oil on top of it. And that'll just make your dough like super crispy and delicious. So don't worry about how much oil there is here. So really gently, you're just going to start patting it out in circular motions or straight out to the side if you want to start to get this thinner disc with slightly thicker edges. You can add more oil if your hands are starting to stick. You can see I have some dough on my hands. And this dough is so fragile, so you want to be really, you can move slowly. This is not a fast process. I've got my oven preheating right now to 450 with my pizza stone in there. Again, if you don't have a pizza stone, that's totally fine. But pizza likes a really hot oven temperature. And I'm just getting this thinner and thinner, being really patient so I don't tear the dough anywhere in the middle. Just going from the middle out to the edges. Kind of like you would with a pie dough, You roll from the middle outward, not from end to end, and then you end up with the most even dough that you can. So once I've got it, big enough, I'll sort of go around the edges. And I'm still sort of pushing. I'm pushing sort of tangentially to make the circle a little bit bigger as I go around. Now, I like a pretty thin crust pizza because I'm a New Yorker. Thick is also delicious with this dough. And again, just leaving it a little thicker. So if you went too thin on the edge, you can sort of push it back in there. Okay. That's good enough for me. Okay, so got my pizza on the parchment. I'm gonna par bake it right now because since the dough has no gluten, putting toppings on top of it would basically force the dough downward. It would keep it from rising. So I'm not gonna get any crumb structure, and I love crumb structure. So we're gonna bake this for about 15 or 20 minutes. Again, it's on 450. Okay, that pizza is par baked. Here we go. So it's got a nice golden color. When I poke it, it doesn't really sink down, so I know that it's not gonna collapse on me. When I looked at it in the oven, let me get propped back up here. When I looked at it in the oven, it was poofy and kind of soft looking. That will make sense when you see it, but it sort of inflates, and then as it bakes, the water gets sucked out of it, it'll shrink a little bit. So it doesn't look this, it looks sort of the same size right now that it's baked, but in the middle, it got a lot bigger. So I know that those yeasts were still active and those air bubbles were expanding. So in the meantime, I've prepped my toppings. Pizza is like the most delicious blank canvas. So you can go anywhere from store-bought sauce and pre-shredded cheese to like wild foraged homemade pesto with, hand-milked ricotta, whatever you want to go is going to be great. So tonight we're doing tomato sauce with fresh mozzarella, stinging nettles, which I was able to get from Good Eggs this past weekend, which I'm so excited about, roasted cherry tomatoes, scallions, and I made a little bit of basil garlic oil here because I was a little too tired to make pesto. Okay. And voila! We have a delicious pizza! So, to summarize, we mixed our dough last night, let it ferment all day with a plate over it, saw that it had a beautiful air bubble structure inside the dough, and then got to work. So I preheated my oven to 450. I prepped some parchment paper, poured on some olive oil, and then gently patted out the dough into its final shape. Par baked it for 15 to 20 minutes until the crust was basically cooked so that it wouldn't collapse on itself. Topped it with my dream assortment of toppings. Put it back in the oven. That was about 15 minutes again. I like the cheese nice and bubbly and brown. But if you like it less bubbly, feel free to cook it for less. And I had pre-cooked my toppings as well, so it didn't really need to stay in very long. And then we eat, and it's great. So, I hope that those sourdough starters are doing well. As a reminder, you'll make this with the discard from the next time you're feeding. So you'll add your fresh flour and water, you'll take out the old flour and water, add some fresh flour and water, and with the old stuff, mix it into this pizza dough recipe. So again, you'll need brown rice flour, arrowroot starch, salt, xanthan gum, and your sourdough starter. It's a pretty simple recipe. We'll have the full details on the blog with all the instructions of how to do it. And I hope that this is a great entryway into a world of sourdough bread. I have not tested this recipe as a loaf. I think with a little bit more water, you'll have a really nice, light, fluffy loaf. Haven't had a chance to test it yet, but if you test it, please let us know how it comes out. And start playing. Here's where you can take this base recipe and add interesting new types of flour to get different flavor profiles, different colors, different textures, different amounts of protein. This is your canvas to start developing your very own recipes. So little tweaks. I threw some fresh oregano into this dough. You know, you can add dry spices, you can vary the amount of salt, you can add oil. It's up to you. And the results are going to be great because it's got this healthy, thriving sourdough as its base. So, fantastic work keeping those sourdough starters alive. If you're just seeing this for the first time and haven't made your starter yet, go a couple videos back and you'll find instructions of how to make your very own sourdough starter from scratch at home. Everybody, be safe. I'll see you next week. Have a wonderful rest of your week and keep on baking.